It's that timeless pursuit of when art merges with the artist, where we put ourselves out there, find that moment of motivation, and ride the momentum, and then love the very art we create. These are all deeply linked to the soul of who we are. Some say you might be able to measure that, but perhaps it is a blind pursuit. Hey everybody, yes, welcome to 21 Grams. I am Joe Compton, and of course, the man to my right needs no introduction, but I'm going to let him have one anyway. Mr. Bob McGough, hello, sir.
Hey, how we doing? I'm excited to be back on here. So,
So tell everybody a little bit about yourself, please.
yeah, I am a author from South Alabama. I'm best known for writing a series of books about a redneck wizard with a crippling meth addiction. But I also do a lot of other things. I do some podcasting. I do a lot of RPG game design. Actually, uh, on Hit the Dice, that was just played 3 nights ago, I think. They
Huh?
played, one of my games, Cryptid Capture Core. That
Yeah.
was fun watch. Y'all need to go back and give that a watch. Not because of me, just because they took my mediocre game and made it look really cool. So, um, Jessica Nettles knocked that one out of the park. So, but yeah, that's me. Do just dabble.
Well, we got some friends here. We got Anita here, and Vanessa here, Tiffany,
Yeah,
Tina's here. Hello, y'all. Uh,
yeah.
I, you know, it's funny that you talk about dabbling because the interesting thing to me that I've kind of seen lately from you is this run to brand, and you're starting to you've really come to the full circle concept of there is a way to brand all of what you do into one conglomeration. And I'm curious from your perspective, was it a matter of you just had enough things that you wanted to do that you had decided this is the time, or was this always the aim? Because knowing you, I know that you have other ambitions beyond just writing the Jubal County saga, right? And so, uh, you know, was this always the plan for you to kind of get this branding going, or did it come naturally with all the things you were doing?
I would say it came naturally, but that kind of nature where like the gazelle with the broken leg gets eaten by the cheetah, um, that kind of naturally. Uh, Pretty early on, I think I had a pretty good concept that branding was important.
Mm.
And I think that largely came from having a last name that no one can pronounce. So I really steered into Tales by Bob because um, no one can pronounce my last name. If they can't pronounce it, they're definitely not going to be able to spell it. Ooh, I'm the fattest gazelle you've ever seen. That's why the cheetah gets me. Um, but so pretty early on, I got lucky and someone made me a really cool logo. I
Mm.
traded work for work, and wrote some blog posts for her. She made a logo for me, and so I knew early on, okay, brand, we're going for a brand here. But where it came, where there were hiccups, where I would routinely, and it's kind of like a boom bust cycle that it
Yeah.
took me a long time to get out of. It's like, okay, hey, I have an idea. Let's do it. Let's make an Instagram account. Let's make a this. Let's make a that. We're gonna really do a whole thing around this one idea. And while it was technically part of my brand, it was very much a separate entity. And so I would end up with, 3 or 4 of these separate entities and then realize, man, this is dumb. I just need to get everything back under one brand. So then things, yeah, things collapse back down into one brand. And then over the next, 3 to 4 years, I just repeat the cycle. Uh, and I would do that over and over. And now I finally learned that um, keeping things more tightly under one umbrella is a much better way to go about it because a lot of the things I do have natural overlaps.
Yeah.
There are a lot of people who like to read books who also like podcasts. So by having them more closely placed, I'm getting more crossover. So
Do you find
um,
there's
yeah,
a certain freedom in that as well? Like you can do more that you want to do without having to explain it to the other part of your audience?
yeah. No, it does make it a little easier. The kind
Because
of
that's the ultimate fear, right? When we write something, we write if we're especially if we're writing something where like it's a redneck wizard with a crippling meth addiction. That's what everybody you say that over and over. Everybody expects that from everything you're writing, and
yeah,
then it's hard to explain the other things. You might want to go esoteric at some point and do something like Kerouac or or go
yeah,
Shakespearean, or even maybe even I know there is somewhere deep inside of Bob a Hallmark, you know, cozy somewhere. So you know, but
yeah.
that those kind of things, if you have if you lean them toward the brand versus leaning them toward the one thing you're known for, that kind of softens the blow, I would imagine.
Yeah, that's the hope because that is literally what I'm about to run into.
Yeah.
I was actually talking with a mutual author friend of ours, Ben Meeks.
Yeah.
We've got to where we're starting up a weekly meeting where we basically talk through our problems. And I was telling him, I was like, look, I have a trilogy that's going to be coming out next year that is very much in the world of Jubal County, but and the topic or the subject sounds a little ridiculous. It's cryptids meets eldritch horror meets Alabama football. But it is horror. It is straight up horror. It lacks a lot of the humor that my Redneck Wizard books have. And so my worry is that people that come on wanting to read Redneck Wizard shenanigans, they get to this, and even though it's the same world, it's a game warden druid. There's still magic. There's all these elements that the worry is, well, oh, God, he's not a redneck. It's not as funny. So yeah, by having it, this is going to be the first time Southern saw that to a lesser degree, but this is going to be the first big push that is, hey, this is Jubal County, but it's different, and it's something that it's it's a gamble, but I'm hoping that now this is the second big push, and then when I have my third big push, and other things, people do come to realize, okay, yeah, Redneck Wizard drug me in, but there's this whole world of different medias and different stories, different types of stories being told here. You joke about the cozy, but I am very very slowly writing a cozy Jubal County saga story
Oh my god.
about a librarian with a magical talking cat.
uh,
Because why wouldn't I?
why wouldn't
Um,
you?
so that one probably won't. That's probably just going to be a Patreon only kind of the book. But who knows? Maybe one day I do put it out, publish it, and say, hey, I've got. If you like cozy, I've got cozy too. It, I just want to tell Southern stories, like stories that are true to the South with wizards. Um, so yeah, yes, cozy is absolutely getting us all. I
Yeah.
feel like that's where I wish when I'd started writing cozies because I would have been slightly ahead of the game. And then when cozy really hit, I'd have been, ooh, I'd have been Travis Baldree. But alas, we all learn.
Tiffany's here. Hello,
So,
Tiffany. Yeah,
hey, hey,
it's fascinating to me. I mean, um, I also think if Breaking Bad had come out 3 years after you started your series, that would have been an interesting um, comparison to make as
yeah.
well. But
And the funny thing is, Alabama's most famous and best meth cook ever was actually named Walter White. Weird coincidence. Like you can look him up. Look up Alabama Walter White. He is he's a real meth cook, and he was real good. So sometimes Truth is stranger than fiction.
You never know where you get inspiration from, I guess.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh, it is kind of interesting to me though that the whole because that horror series, is that the one you're doing under Dread?
No, that is, what I'm doing under Falstaff Dread is a standalone horror novel,
Mm.
but it is a standalone horror novel set in, Montgomery, and it's essentially if a Jubal County story went bad, like, basically, if Howard Marsh didn't save the day, this is what would happen. So it's
Mm.
that kind of story. It's kind of a post-apocalyptic monsters destroy Montgomery kind of story. So it is, I guess you could say it's set in an alternate version of Jubal County. Um,
It's like that
but
scene
it's
from
again, yeah,
it's like
and
that scene
again,
from
like,
It's like that scene from Ghostbusters. Cats and dogs, mass hysteria.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh, it's a fun romp. For kind of a horror thriller.
Yeah,
Uh, but yeah, it is again. That's just one of those. It's also tonally very different from
sure.
the main Jubal County stuff. But yeah, eventually people are going to learn that by positioning this stuff all that like, hey, it's adjacent stuff. Like the Jubal
Yeah,
County saga, while it is urban fantasy, it does have horror elements to it. There are some fairly dark scenes,
yeah.
some fairly horrific scenes, and so uh, there's overlap there. And I'm not saying that it will appeal to horror readers, but I'm saying it will appeal to some horror readers and vice versa. So,
Yeah,
uh,
the one comforting thing about Jubal County or yeah, about the saga that I think, and Howard Marsh in particular, is that there's going to be some kind of bumbling. There's going to be some kind of stupid thing that Howard does that gets him in trouble. That we all just kind of go, oh, Howard, and then the other thing is that that there's a level of humor that is involved with that series that is going to ultimately sweep over it, even if it gets dark and stormy and a little bit on the more macabre side. There's still that you've found your voice very strongly in that series, and so what I'm curious about though is Southern Saudade is is a departure from that as well. And I'm imagining that more of the horror that you're talking about that you're writing now, and the dread is going to be leaning more toward that than the Howard Marsh voice. So I'm curious, had did the Howard Marsh voice ever have what you are leaning towards now in it, that you kind of curtailed, or was that voice very prominent from the beginning that you have had with a little bit of the humor and the bumbling, Jacques Cousteau-ish kind of aspects to it,
so
or
the,
excuse me, Detective Clouseau. Sorry, not
yeah,
Dr. Clouseau.
the two styles of writing I was most comfortable with when I was starting out, long before Jubal County came to be, was horror is my first love,
Mhm.
and then but when I'm writing anything nonfiction or anything like that, like I default to humor. Um, in another life, I would be Louis Grizzard 2.0, or like a nonfiction Carl Hyacin.
uh,
Um, and so, and this is something that people ask, like, is Jubal County? Oh, it's Redneck Wizard. It's got to be funny. The first book uh, actually isn't that funny. There's a couple of scenes that are utterly ridiculous and funny, but really, especially the second half of it, there's not a lot of this played for laughs. Now, as the series goes, it does work in a little bit more humor.
mhm.
Um, so, uh, but I didn't set out to like when I sat down to write the Jubal County Saga, I did not set out to write a comedic take on this guy. Like, yes, the premise is kind of ridiculous, but the point of that story is to write a redemption story. I want to write a happy ending in honor of the folks that aren't going to have a happy ending. And so with each of them, I try. I'm trying to get something different across. So, like, the core message behind Jubal County is that we all have value. Just because someone is a drug addict doesn't mean they're not worthy of love. Um, with the um, with my horror trilogy that's coming out, I'm trying to, and I don't know if I'm nailing it, but something that's become very important to me as I get older is loneliness.
Mhm,
Now, I'm very lucky to have some really great friends, um, but I have a lot of people in my life that I know that really struggle with that, or I see
mhm,
people that really struggle with that. And there's been tons of studies that talk about how basically loneliness is killing, especially men, middle-aged men, especially married men.
mhm,
Loneliness is literally killing them. There's a great, I think it was Atlantic, did a huge long write-up on it that was really, really kind of eye-opening for me. Um, and so, but it's across American culture. We're more lonely and isolated now than we ever have been,
mhm,
and so I'm trying to write a trilogy about a guy who is very lonely and he is very isolated. Even though he's married, he's basically self-isolated and trying to make a character that is relatable, that people can see themselves in and see, you are lonely, but that doesn't mean that your life isn't valid. Loneliness is not the sum total of your existence.
mhm.
So, and it was something Sawdad is just the other thing I like to think I'm good at is writing mopey sad boy stories. So,
Mm.
uh, I thought, oh, let me just write all my mopey sad boy stories and take all my all my years of bitter loneliness and single life and terrible dates and whatnot, and throw them in a blender and write a bunch of quasi spooky stories that are all sad. So, um, but yeah, so that's kind of where
Yeah,
I'm coming at for them.
yeah.
Um,
Vanessa brings up a good point that I was going to talk about too, which is, I love reading stories that tie together, have commonality, but technically are in the same stories. It brings me as a reader into the family because there's a familiarity, and there is that with Sawdad connected to Jubal County. Um, the interesting thing to me that I think is maybe lost on people because Howard Marsh is such an enduring, crazy character, and I'm sure you've had people cosplay as Howard Marsh. You've had people talk to you about Howard Marsh, myself included, trying to get deeper and deeper into the mind of somebody who probably is not that deep to begin with. But he's not all of Jubal County, and I think it almost felt like either it was like a dare or something like you wanted to show like something strong inside of you that you wanted to show that Jubal County is not just Howard Marsh, that there's other things that make up this crazy area of the world.
yeah. And it kind of goes back to, and kind of why I'm writing this quasi little cozy thing in the background is exactly that. Like, I wanted to write an accurate depiction of life in the South, and
Mhm.
if you've lived in the backwoods like I have, we all know someone like Howard Marsh. Now they're not going to be a wizard, probably, um, but we all know someone that's just over the top
At least not
crazy.
not
They
in
just
practice. They might tell you
yeah,
they're a wizard.
you're right. But that kind of person that they just can't get their life together.
Yeah,
They got no act right there. Um, and so I wanted to accurately portray that experience while not being a cliche.
yeah,
That I really hate cliche when it comes to things like that. So, but part of this is like this trilogy I'm writing, I could have made them Howard Marsh books.
yeah,
Um, if I wanted, I could have. I could have made Howard Marsh the main character, but I didn't want to do that because I want to show that there are other people in the see what life is like in the South from someone who's a little more normal. Even though, yeah, he's a wizard. Well, he's a druid. He's a game warden druid, but he's got a day job. He's got a wife. He's got responsibilities, um, and just kind of showing what life is like for someone like that. It's a different sort of life. Uh, and so, yeah, there's a, uh, uh, I think it's sometimes easier to write, or I don't say, it seems like for me, it's absolutely easier to write the quirky
Mm.
because I'm a quirky, weird dude. So that's just what comes more naturally. It's harder for me to write a normal person than it is to write a weird person. so, so there's a bit of that going on that I do want to show. And with Southern Sawdad, the main novella in there is about a 17-year-old kid who's normal. He's just a
Yeah.
normal 17-year-old kid. Then that it's very autobiographical. It is very similar to what life was like for me
Uh,
growing up in the backwoods. Um,
except for what
now
happens
I
to
didn't.
that 17-year-old kid at the end of
Yeah,
everything, right?
I didn't fall in love with a hitchhiking ghost. But
I wasn't gonna spoil it, Bob. You just spoiled it for everybody, right?
no, 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 no. You'll be fine. But yeah, so it's one of those. Uh, Trying to show, I said it in the '80s because I grew up a little bit in the '80s,
Yeah,
and also, uh, it's just stories are easier to write without cell phones in them.
especially horror
So
stories.
yeah, so yeah, everything I do, I'm just trying to peel the onion that is the Southern experience. But
Plus, you get the mullets, you get the rock, you get the Alabama rock, you get all the things that are so warm and cozy about the '80s that lend itself to. God damn, that's horrific in its just in
yeah,
itself. Thinking about right. Uh,
oh
Dino's
yeah.
here, Juliet's here.
Hey,
Hello, y'all.
Dino.
Nice to see you both.
Hey,
Um, Historical
yeah,
people are so challenging to rate. Yeah, I
they
mean,
are. How do they even think? Like what do they have going on? What? Shopping at Abercrombie& and Fitch, American Eagle? I don't know. I don't know that life.
is
I
that a
can't write
normal
that.
person? If that's a
I
normal
I went
person,
to
I don't want to meet that person. But
I went to Hot Topic this past weekend, for my kiddo. My kiddo has discovered Hot Topic, and it was a trip down, uh, cringy, high school mall goth Bob lane, memory lane. Ugh. Um, Oh yeah, and that's something else is, you see Marsh frequently runs into a lot of, like, metalheads and punks
uh
and stuff like that, which are not a lot, in the rural South, but they are there, and that was my experience growing up. Like, I was one of
yeah,
a dozen, metalheads in my school, and
the,
so just trying to show that there's more to the South than, Klan hats, um,
the
while
cringy thing
also
about
not.
like a hot topic now though is like, um, it was the t-shirts that were hanging up were like Led Zeppelin in the Doors, and now they're Iron Maiden and Ozzy, and everybody goes, "Who are those old relics?" You know?
Yeah. I walked into a Spencer's also, and the Spencer's was more Hot Topic than the Hot Topic was. Um, it was so weird. I was like, "What alternate reality have I walked myself into?" And oh yeah, Vanessa is absolutely right. I did not meet my first punk until I got to college.
Yeah.
Knew lots of metalheads, but I never met a punk until I got to
See, and I
college.
grew up. I grew up in the South Bay of California, where punk was at its peak. You know, Bad
Yeah.
Religion and those bands and things like that. Black Flag and Henry Rollins, and I mean, those were all bands that I saw in backyards at parties and not just on stages. You know, so yeah,
I didn't know those bands existed until after college mostly. Um,
yeah.
so yeah, there was no punk scene in Crenshaw County, Alabama. So, mm. The
I
closest we got was I knew a girl who her dad drove, one of the buses for the Warp Tour,
okay.
and so that made her the coolest person I'd ever encountered. Um, had a huge
Which
crush.
the Warped Tour had all kinds of different things. It had ska, it had surf rock,
That's
it had all
something.
kinds of different.
Yeah.
It had metal too. It
Yeah.
actually was the birth of where death metal became very popular, doom metal and death metal and black metal all because they wouldn't be allowed on the normal metal tours because all these cringy metalhead promoters who wanted clean vocals and
Yeah.
craziness. So, you know,
Yeah.
uh, the
No, so
necessity.
that
I did
was
Black Flag when I was in high school in South Carolina because the editor of the student paper was super edgy.
yep. Yeah. So yeah,
Yeah. I didn't know about Gothic until I got into the Marines. I had no idea about The Cure and uh, Sisters
now
of
I was
Mercy and things like that.
uh
So,
I think my junior year of high school, I got introduced to Typo Negative,
mm,
and they've been my favorite band ever since. So how I found out about them in Crenshaw County, but not any of the other bands we've talked about, who knows? Well, I do know how, but it's like just weird
I
how
have
these
to
things work out.
imagine there's a vampire culture in Alabama, though.
Um, when I got to college, there was a uh, all the all the metalheads and goths and punks hung out on the steps of the Math and Science complex,
Mm,
and that's just where we all hung out.
I
And I
know.
just remember there was a couple, and it was my first experience having encountered this, but there was a couple there that uh, he was a vampire and she was uh, a cat shifter, and so she did not wear shoes at any. She never wore shoes because she could change form at any time. And I'm not passing judgment. It was just a weird thing, you know. Whatever makes you happy.
Right.
But for a guy from Crenshaw County, Alabama, at that time was like, what?
Yeah.
What? So college was good for me.
Yeah.
It got me out of a very narrow slice of life.
I, I
So
I I should say I knew about the Cure, Vanessa, but most of like the alternative stuff that was going on in my high school at the time was new wave. It was Depeche Mode. It was which I mean you could kind of classify as a little bit gothic, but Duran Duran, Tears for Fears, those were all bands that were really huge when I was growing up. And then Twisted Sister came around and changed everything, a new perspective for me. So it was kind of interesting, but. Although I grew
yeah,
up, my dad was a metalhead or hard rock fan. He liked Van Halen and Leonard Skinner and stuff like that. So I adopted all his old tapes, Jethro Tull and all those
oh yeah,
bands. And then I got, as you do, you evolve and you get into Black Sabbath and Iron Maiden. That's the rest is
yeah,
history. You
yeah. Then it's off to the races.
know.
Yep,
How much does music play a part in what you write? Is that something that you lean on quite heavily?
it is.
I don't think we've talked about this before. It's interesting.
Uh, it's a huge part of what I write. Actually, if you go to the very back of Southern Sawdad,
Mhm,
um, most of the stories have playlists for
mhm,
them. Um, uh, a lot of you know, the the title of I think my favorite story in the collection is "All's Well That Ends Well and Moves with the Sun," and that was actually the original title of the song "Take on Me," which that is basically the point of that story.
yeah,
Is uh, uh, "Take on Me" is mine and my wife's song, um, and so uh, music is hugely influential. There's a song by the Builders and the Butchers that I listened to every night going to sleep for several years. That to me is the Jubal County Saga in a song. And so I have, if you go to my website, there's uh, you can go to Spotify. I have an embedded Spotify playlist, but you can just go to Spotify and find it. But I have the music of Marsh playlist it is a playlist I listen to while I write Howard Marsh. Mostly like folky Americana kind of stuff. But there's some outliers. There's the occasional kind of more like stoner rock song, or the occasional like outlaw country. A lot
mhm,
of Tyler Childers, Sturgill Simpson, Bilge and the Butchers, Lost Dog Street Band. Brent Cobb, um, which is weird because like I kind of really hate country, um, and it's kind of my most hated genre. And so there's not really much in the way of country on there, or if there is, it's not. There's no mainstream country on there unless you count Sturgill Simpson. Ooh, yeah, those are the butchers. They're so good. They're so good. Sturgill is probably as close to mainstream country as I get, but the songs that I really like of his are not really. They're
Mhm.
more like he's got one song called "Turtles All the Way Down," which is really about using a lot of drugs. And that is a theme on a lot of the songs. If I
Mhm.
find any sort of folky song that's about doing hard drugs, it's probably going to make it on that playlist just because it always tickles me when it's a bluegrass song about doing coke. It's like I don't know, that tickles me in a way I can't explain. So um, there's a lot of songs about meth. There's a lot of songs. One of my favorite songs is by Tyler Childers. It's called "Nose to the Grindstone,"
Uh-huh.
and the chorus is "Keep your nose on the grindstone and out of the pills." Um, I was like, "Yeah, okay, I like that line. That's cool. It's a cool line."
I
So
mean, it's
I've heard,
it's 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 more Southern rock, but like, "Ooh, that smell," or something to that effect, where it's, about them getting all loaded and dying of wrapping your car around a tree kinda shit, so
yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah. Now, weirdly, I don't think I have any Leonard on there, which
uh,
is strange because I can't believe I haven't put on the Bob's hot take. The best song Leonard Skinner ever wrote was "On the Hunt." Um,
mm.
Bob's second hot take, top three song Corrosion of Conformity ever did was a cover of "On the Hunt" by Leonard Skinner. So uh, yeah, I can't believe I haven't put that on there. I feel kind of ashamed now. But yeah, I mean, I grew up on Skinner. "Sweet Home Alabama" is shockingly the unofficial state song.
Yeah,
Uh, and you know,
which is
you think
quite
you think you've
ironic.
seen a lot. Yeah, you think you've seen a lot of concerts where they yell "Free Bird" at the end, play "Free Bird." Oh my God, there's not a concert in Alabama that you don't hear it. Even like at the punk and metal shows. Now there, it's more ironic. People
Eh,
will shout it out. But yeah, it is relentless here. So
that's funny.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. But because my master's is in music industry.
mm,
Before I kind of rediscovered writing as my passion, I really wanted to do concert production. I, I roaded for a band for a few years. I wrote metal zines. I wrote articles about music. I did a lot of press work for various bands that most folks have never heard of. Um, uh, and I was heavily involved in the punk scene. uh, Helped throw a lot of concerts, things like that. I worked as a stagehand. So, I mean, music was the consumed my life. For a guy who can't play anything, can't even read music and sing horribly, music was my life for um, 5 or 6 years. Uh, was my primary focus, and then uh, as I was wrapping up my graduate degree in music industry, is when I wrote again for the first time, and it was like, oh wait, no, this is what I really like to do. Um, Wish I'd remembered it. Uh, about $30,000 less into student loan debt would have been nice, but lessons learned. Um,
Joe's hot take is that "Give Me Three Steps" is the best Leonard Skinner song you could write.
that's
I think that is
that's
the funniest
mm,
song I've ever heard in my life, and I enjoy laughing about that song. So,
yeah, that's a good one.
uh,
"Give Me Back My Bullets" is my second favorite.
mm,
Um, and Weed Eater
hmm
did an amazing cover of that song. So um, yeah, Leonard
there you
Skinner
go.
is even it, it's a real good band to cover. Let's
Yeah,
just say that.
yeah.
So
They use typical chords and basics, but they
yeah,
also do it in a way that is very endearing and kind of very Howard Marsh like in a lot of
yeah.
respects. You know.
And it to me, v- I So I write these essays from the perspective of Howard Marsh, and I call them the Marsh Dispatches, and I put them on my Patreon, and I
Yeah.
write up just and it's typically something in my environment has triggered me to think about this thing is like, well, what would Howard Marsh's take be on this? And I have one that I haven't finished writing that I keep kind of going back to, and it's about how Leonard Skinner ruined their legacy. They went from this very anti-authoritarian kind of, middle finger in the air kind
Yeah.
of, they basically more or less started Southern rock, which early on was so much of that, like, it's like
Yeah.
NASCAR. My favorite thing is that like one of my favorite memes I've ever seen is uh, talking about like the start of NASCAR. It is like, why do we start dirt track racing? Is because we were souping up our cars to run from the cops. And why did we run from the cops? Because fuck them. You know, like that was so much of Southern culture.
Yeah.
It was, to hell with it. We're going to do our own thing. Now there's a dark side to that, obviously,
Yeah.
but there's a part of that that I find very aspirational. Is like, no, we are going to do. We're freedom loving. We're going to do what we want to do. And now Leonard Skinner, the music they put out is music that the Leonard Skinner of the '70s would
Have shit on.
take them out in the street and
Yeah.
beat themselves with. And
Yeah.
it's like you had a legacy and you
I
you
mean,
ruined it to cash in to get a few extra bucks.
people do evolve, but and they
They do.
sometimes evolve badly. It's not always
Well,
it's
yeah.
not always a good evolution. It's not always a good turn. So
Yeah. 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 No, and it's one thing, like, I'm a lot more forgiving on bands if they
mm,
evolve their sound and, like, they go in a weird direction and people, "Oh, I can't believe they did that," I fell in love with them for this, and how dare
yeah,
they. No, like, look, if you just it would drive me nuts if I was, uh if I was Metallica and they just expected me to write the Black Album every time,
yeah,
over and over and over and over. Or if they'd been like, "Y'all peaked at Master of Puppets, we just want that album over and over and over and over again," I would lose my mind. So I
yeah,
totally get changing tone, things like that, and I'm very forgiving on that. I may not like the album, but I'm not gonna be like, "How dare you?"
right,
How dare you?" But it's just I kinda feel like there you can betray your legacy,
yeah.
and that's what I feel like they have done,
There's
and
also
I hope 20 years from now, when I'm,
mm,
mega famous and, am worth billions, and Joe, I hope that you're right there with me, so if I start to betray my legacy, I hope you smack me, and then I'll just blot my tears with crisp $100 bills, and then we'll go hit the bar, um, on our island,
all
so but
right.
I'm counting on you to keep me honest.
Okay, and fair enough. I'll take that job. Um, but there is also a flip side to that coin, which I think is where Metallica is right now, and that's rinse and repeat. Right? You get so tired of fighting that you find something that you're comfortable doing, and you just keep doing it over and over and over and over. And a lot of smart people like this was something that was happening in Megadeth, and Dave Ellefson said, "You know what? We're doing the same shit over and over and over again. I don't want to be part of this. I want to be part of your born again stuff. I don't want to be part of any of your Republican nonsense. So I'm going to take my leave of you and walk away, right?" And then you listen to the next like three Megadeth albums. There's one like good turn, and then they just lean on that for the next two albums, right? So it's kind of there's kind of that aspect to it too. So keeping it fresh is one thing, and I respect bands who do that. But I also think that if you do that and you stay where you're comfortable and just be lazy about it, it's not. I think that's almost worse in a lot of respects.
Yeah, and that's the Howard Marsh stories are they're not necessarily easy to write, but they're easy to spin up ideas for,
Hmm.
and it's people like them. I mean, I look, I ain't getting rich over here, but people buy them. People like
Yet.
them. And it's one of those. I could have, you know, I could just keep churning those out.
Yeah.
You know, seemingly forever. There's no end of just dumb shit a redneck can get into South Alabama. Um, but it's one of those. I don't know. Just that would drive me crazy.
Yeah.
Um,
Well,
and
you always had this idea that there was this arc of his redemption, right? And so,
yeah, it
you
has an end.
you might have changed how many books it was, but you've always had the idea that it was going to end at some point, and the way it was going to end.
Yeah, I know how, which is rare for me. Half the
Yeah,
time I start writing something and have no idea how it ends, and I find my way there. But
yeah,
I've always known how the series ends, what it's working towards. And yeah, initially it was going to be 18 books. Now I'm somewhere between 12 and 18, just because I look at the arc of my life, how many years I realistically have left, and how much other. The main thing is how much other stuff I want to do. Um,
sure.
And so
Yeah.
between 12 and 18, it just depends uh, on how they go, uh, and depend on how soon I get to retire from my state job and do this full time. Uh, that's the that's the real kicker. We'd be
Yeah.
getting a lot more Howard Marsh out in the world if I didn't have to work for a living.
The
Mm.
the other interesting thing about the what the trajectory is that you spend a lot of time being transparent, right? And that's very important to you, and putting out there. And of course, yes, I'm leaning towards something that we're going to announce here tonight. But there is also an interesting idea behind that, because that's a lot of work too. I mean, I wonder how much could you ballpark how much you spend on brand and putting yourself out there versus putting your stuff out there? Because I have to imagine it's
So
probably 50-50, if not more.
so are you talking about time, time
Yeah,
commitment or
I mean,
dollars?
time,
Oh
effort,
yeah,
the whole thing, because a lot of what people are a lot less forgiving of you not putting stuff out there, even though you've put out a book or two every year since I've known you, since this year. This is, I think,
yeah.
the first
I
time that you haven't.
I
Um,
put one little book out,
yeah.
but yeah.
But you've also evolved beyond your books and done probably what, 9 zines this year, 9 one-pagers. You've done a lot of
Oh,
game
yeah.
stuff
I've done
this year.
yeah, I've put out
So,
5 full-fledged games
yeah, and
and,
those
a bunch
are
of
all flushed
one-pagers.
out this year. So, I mean,
Yeah.
that's so you were doing something, but you know what I mean? There is this is what a lot of authors struggle with, right? Especially authors trying to get to the point where they want to be that's what they want to be, who they are. And so, you know, they putting that branding out there. Is there? Do you have like a set schedule where you take time to do this, to do that? I mean, I'm just curious about
It's
the process in creating this idea.
I would at this point, I spend like, really thinking about it, it's probably 70-30. I probably spend 70% of my time doing the business of
Yeah,
Bob versus 30% of writing
right.
stuff. Um, and, in a perfect world, I write 5,000 words a week. I write 1,000 words a day, and that takes me anywhere from, uh, call it 35, 40 minutes to an hour, just
Yeah,
depends. It typically gets quicker as the week goes on. Like, Monday will take me about an hour to get there. Friday, I'm close to 35 minutes probably to get 1,000 words out. Um, and that's, perfect world, I actually get to write every day. Um, and so, this year has been hot garbage for that, for just a huge variety of reasons. Um, but, yeah, I would typically for me, um, most nights I come home from work and I work for, uh, at least 2 hours doing stuff.
yeah,
Um, and then on the weekend, either Saturday or Sunday, I try to do a big chunk where I'll tackle like more time consuming projects. So
Mhm.
I might work, I would say never less than 3 hours and up to the norm would be 5 or 6 hours. And I've worked as much as, I mean, I've worked all day before just on stuff, but I do try and save one day on the weekend. If I'm not like doing stuff with the family, that I get to play a video game. Uh, but even then, a lot of times I'll get up and I'll let me just crank out something for an hour or two.
Uh-huh.
But it can be a variety of things. You know, that might be recording a podcast. Like stuff like this week, I'm actually trying to set up some collaborations with folks talking about branding. I made a pitch deck basically that is here's 3 or 4 pages that basically explain in broad strokes Jubal County. Here are the major IPs within it. Here are my plans in the coming, few years. And then these are the kind of opportunities I'm looking for. And here are some examples of stuff I have going on.
Yeah.
And so every so often I put up a post. It's like, hey, would you like to collaborate? Reach out. And so I've had a few people nibble. And so now I have this deck that I can send them. I was like, hey, okay, this is kind of where I'm at.
Yeah.
See if any of this appeals to you. For example, I had a musician reach out to me, and I would love to have some Jubal County music,
Yeah.
but I don't have the money to pay for studio time for them
Yeah.
to record stuff, just flat out, or hire musicians or things like that. So I don't think that's going to happen because they wanted me to pay for their studio time, which is fair, but ain't in my budget. Um, so just stuff like that. I've got one project that looks like it's heading in a good direction that's come from this, and so it can be stuff like that, just exchanging
Yeah.
emails, but then a lot of it is making promo images, working on book covers, doing book layout. Literally, God, if my notebook was closer, I would hold it up, but you can just see it's page after page after page of lists of these are the things I got to get done, um, and it never ends. Um, and uh, a lot of it I really like to do,
Yeah.
um, and so it works. Like I really like doing like my graphic design stuff, like making book covers and stuff like that. I do find that really enjoyable. Um, but then some of it's miserable. I hate editing podcasts.
Yeah.
I just hate it.
Well,
Um, but I
I
like recording them.
yeah.
So it
Yeah.
all evens out.
I also contend though that you probably had your most successful year you've ever had as an author this year, I would assume. Just knowing
Yeah.
you and knowing what you've been doing and seeing you in action, and in doing that without having produced something of significance in terms of a book or anything like that, it's almost 50-50 that the brand is selling a lot more for you. Obviously, you wouldn't have the brand if you didn't have the books to begin with,
Right. Yeah.
but the brand is now being authenticating toward what you have in your backlist as a versus new stuff that is becoming more prevalent out there for people to grab onto, right? So I mean,
Mhm.
I'm you know that I'm very sad about how Southern Saudade has been treated because
Yeah.
I believe that is a work of art, and I'm behind that book 1,000,000,000%, and I'm behind every. I mean,
Sure.
I love the
Yeah.
redemption of Howard Marsh, but and it's I mean, Bringing Home the Rain is probably one of my favorite books of all time. So it's like eh, but it just
I
seems
appreciate
like
it.
there's a lot more of you being selling than the books themselves this year.
Yeah. No, that tracks. I've got my stat sheet up here,
Uh-huh.
and I suspect I will. By the time the year is done, but by the time December is done, when I crunch all the numbers, I will have sold between 2,000 and 2,500 more dollars worth of stuff this year as opposed to last year. Last year, I broke 10,000. I have broke 12,000 for this year. Um, and so I will sell,
And that's
you know,
that's gross, right? Not net, or is that net?
yeah, yeah, that's gross. That's gross. And that's something that I have where I'm huge on transparency, and something that I have not done a good job of is showing
Mhm.
my expenses. I'm
Yeah,
really good about showing, like I show expenses for conventions,
yeah.
like how much it cost me to go there, but I don't show a good job of showing how much money I've spent on dumb shit over the course of the um, uh,
Dumb shit.
but
Let's
it's one of
clarify.
those,
Dumb shit that matters to your brand, not just dumb
yeah,
shit. Period. You know.
like I bought look, I started a micro press called Bearded Bard Inkworks that has an octopus and a top hat as the mascot, and Amazon had a octopus and a top hat, okay? When I saw that, I had to buy it. Like there was like that's going to be on the table for Bearded Bard Inkworks. Like by God, there was no debate. But it's stuff like this. Like you see, I have a you may can see that's a not a microphone stand. That's a postcard,
Uh
spinning
huh.
postcard rack. And what I've learned is that postcards sell pretty awful. I cannot, and that's not in general. That's just for me. I cannot sell postcards to save my
They
life. Apparently, so I bought this rack thinking it would help. It didn't. It now just sits on the shelf
well,
here. So
I've got
I
good repurposing for you on that. I think you could put your zines in there. I think they would fit in there.
Yeah, I think I that's it, that's why I didn't throw it away. We'll see how it goes. But so I haven't done a good job of showing where I spend my money every
Yeah.
year. And so now I'm not going to do that monthly, but in 11 days there will be a blog post that shows where I spent my money this year. And I do pretty much sink it right back into the business. By and large, buying new inventory, buying and it's one of those deals like, if this was my job, I would not buy a lot of the stuff that I buy, but I have a day job that pays my bills. So I can basically gamble. I can try things out like, okay, well, let me buy this type of rack and see if it works, if it improves my sales. And if it doesn't, it's fine. I haven't hurt myself. Um,
Well,
and so experimentation, and then hopefully people can learn from my experimentation, and then they don't go and buy all the dumb stuff that I shouldn't have bought. So
you know where this conversation was leading,
yeah,
and
yeah.
we've been sitting on this news since Dragon Con. Bob and I hammered out a deal where Bob is going to be appearing on Go Indie Now much more regularly, because we are going to be premiering a brand new show for Mr. Bob McGough called Page Numbers, and it is basically what we've just been talking about: the transparency of numbers. He's going to have certain guests on. I would assume mostly authors at this point, but maybe down the road there'll be more indie artists that he talks to about their
I've
transparency,
got
because I think that would be interesting as well.
the first batch. I have a podcaster,
There you go.
or a multi, their
Hmm.
digital media uh,
Hmm.
type guy. I don't want to say his name till I record the episode because who
Yeah,
knows what will happen between now and then. But yeah, yeah. It's page numbers. It's easier because I have a point of reference that I can
right.
really speak to. But yeah, the intention is to bring on any sort of indie creative. So
Mhm. And give transparency to a business that ultimately we should all be transparent about. But it's really, I think it's really interesting to see. I think because there's such a misnomer about what authors do, even day to day authors, right? And what they spend and what they actually make. And this is a show that's going to, either codify that myth, or basically blow it out of the water, right? So,
I do know some of the people I'm bringing on, but I know the bulk of the people that I'm bringing on are not going to dispel the myth of the starving artist. Uh, I do have some people that, they are a creative for a living,
Mhm.
but most aren't. but I'm trying to get people at every stage. Like I don't, you know, I want to interview someone that this is their first year doing this. I want to
Right.
interview someone who's been doing this for 40 years, and just so we can talk about, hey, all the different stages of where we're at in our career. So that hopefully there'll be something in there for everyone that they can get value from.
And that'll premiere this January, everybody. So get ready for page numbers. We're real excited about that. All right, Bob. So I've been doing this at the end of this season. Last year we took the questionnaire. This season I have 50 questions, and let me pull them up real quick. And basically, you're going to give me five numbers, and I'm going to take those numbers to whatever question corresponds to that. It's these deep, really deep, profound
Yeah.
questions. Not really, but it is what it
Yeah.
is. And so, hang on just a second. Let me make sure I pull everything up. Okay. And grab my pen. All right. Give me five numbers, Mr. McGough.
12 is my favorite number.
Okay.
And then 17, 26, 35, 44.
All right. All new numbers. I don't think we've had any of these, which is awesome. All right.
Well, wizard.
Okay. Number 12 is, what other authors are you friends with, and how did they help you become a better writer?
Oh, geez. I will winnow this list down
Thank
to
you.
the three authors that have influenced me the most, who have really
There you go.
shaped my career. Bobby Nash, John Hartness, John G. Hartness, and Ben Meeks. Um, Ben Meeks taught me how to sell books in person. Um, Bobby Nash, I've just modeled a lot of what I do off of him and kind of how he comports himself. Um, and then Hartness is basically been my career model. Like I've modeled a lot of how I do things off of how he does things because he does this for a living and I don't. So I feel like I should listen to what he's got to say.
Okay. 17 we have actually had before. And number 17 is, um, what authors did you dislike at first but have now grown into?
Um, I'm going to say a lot of lit RPG authors. It took me a long time to kind of get my head in the game on that one, but
Uh-huh.
there was one, the one I'm reading now that like I actually talked about like this is the favorite thing I've read this year. Like I'm not saying it's the best written, but is the most fun thing I've had to read this year is by Jolly Jupiter, one word, but it's called Beers and Beards. It's a lit RPG about dwarves and making beer. Um, and man, I don't give a flying flip about how you actually brew beer. And this book gets real in the weeds on brewing beer. And I was like, I don't think I'm gonna like this. And the more I read on it, the more like, no, this is amazing. I still don't care about brewing beer, but
I was gonna be like, are you now brewing a beer and a beer?
yeah, I want to drink beer. I don't want to read about making beer. um, so that would be one. And there's a lot of those people like lit RPG guys. It normally takes me a while to kind of get into those, and I don't.
Uh-huh.
I 9 times out of 10 think I'm not going to like it. But they do tend to normally win me over just by having really cool, unique premises.
Nice. I swear these questions they're random as you've all seen, but every time there is really one that I think really is apropos of the person asking it. So you kind of bring that energy in, and it does. And I think this is a great question to ask Bob McGough, and that is, what does literary success look like to you?
Um, I'll say success in general to me looks like big goal, full time, reasonable goal. Once a year, I can take a trip with my wife anywhere in the world, and I can pay for it off of what I've earned writing. If I can do that, I'll be happy. Literary success, I'm not a big prize guy, but I will say I want to leave enough of an impact on the state of Alabama's literary scene Actually do a lot of work kind of behind the scenes, like trying to help
Uh,
grow the scene. I run a small nonprofit that supports art, culture, and music, um, and, and with a lot of focus on literary arts. And I can't reveal it now, but I have kind of like a big project in work that I think is going to really reshape how a population in Alabama interacts with books. So to me, literary success actually has nothing to do with my books. Like I hope, yeah, cool. I get a Nebula or something. That'd be great. But to me, literary success is my home state recognizes that I was good for books
well,
in some
may-
way.
maybe next year, not Nebula, but a Stoker might be in your future. So
Yeah. Oh man, oh man, that'd be real cool.
yeah,
Like
that
I
would
said,
be
I don't typically care about prizes,
yeah,
because I just feel like I would down that path lies madness,
yeah.
for me. Um, but no, I don't know. I would like to be acknowledged for helping the book scene in Alabama. So,
I love that. So number 35 is: have you read anything that has changed your opinion about fiction?
hmm, have I read anything about? Hmm, nothing comes to mind. Um, I, I'll say that the closest I can think of is I will readily admit I was real hard on lit RPG. Um,
Ah, interesting.
I I was real hard on it, and to be fair, I had tried a few and bounced off them really hard.
Uh,
But honestly, Dungeon Crawler Carl by Deneman um, changed my opinion of what lit RPG can be,
ah,
um, because it is arguably one of the more ridiculous premises of all lit RPG, and it's so over the top. It's over the top even for a lot of lit RPG. But it's got a bizarre like, once you get past, like, what every book you get deeper into it, you realize how much heart it has to it, and it's got this meta plot going on that is, like, just so rich and impactful. It's amazing, and so that kinda opened my eyes, like, my experience with lit RPG had been it's just folks churning out stuff to hit a specific market, to hit all the tropes, and this showed me, no, there are people out there who are taking the craft super seriously, and and since then I have found others. So once I had my eyes opened, then I was like, okay, well, let me go read some lists and see what people are actually recommending that I think I would like. So,
nice.
yeah.
All right. Number 44 is: if you could travel back to any era, what era would you travel back to?
It's got to be the modern era because your boy likes a hot shower. Um, I'm not some like, ooh, I can't. No, but look, I like hot showers.
To know Bob is to love Bob. This is the most simple man I've ever met in my entire life. He orders just a plain hamburger, never wants anything else on it. Has I don't think I've ever seen him like he'll order if there's not a hamburger on the menu, he'll order the chicken fingers or chicken
Yeah,
strips. Uh, it's just the loving, beautiful thing about Bob McGough, and that
I got
totally does not surprise me. Plus, I would think, you know, big man doesn't want to run away from swords and dragons and shit like that.
oh,
So,
God no. No, no, God no. So I would say, I think it would be cool to go back to uh, the '60s
uh-huh,
to experience a little bit of hippie culture. Like
uh-huh,
my stepmom went to Woodstock. I think it'd be cool to go to Woodstock. Um, but I also acknowledge that, it's a lot cooler as a white dude to go back to the '60s.
yeah,
It's not cool for everyone. But that said, they got hot showers. They got pretty much all the same foods that we have now. Um, and I don't know. I just think
and
it,
for 5 cents.
the
I mean, hamburgers were 5 cents back then. So,
man, the dream, the dream. So yeah, I think to check out a little bit of the counterculture of the '60s, I think would be cool. Um, and bounce before we get to disco. I can't dance, so.
Awesome. Well,
Mhm.
Bob, um, you can't dance, but you sure can talk, and it's just been a lovely opportunity to do so tonight. Because I could not have thought of a better person and a better way to end this. Because I think it worked out perfectly with the announcement of your show and everything like that. That we were able to do this tonight, and thank you for being here, sir, and doing this. I really do appreciate it always. So.
Yeah, no, I love coming on Go Indie Now. It's I tell people all the time is like, "No, you are missing out. Go be on it. They're so welcoming. Like, just go. There's a show for you to be on. You've got value. Go show it off." So yeah, this is my my virtual home away from my own podcast. So
Oh, tell
yeah,
everybody
I love
where
it
they
here.
can find you and check everything you're doing out.
Yep, tellsbybob.com. And there are, if you just search Tells by Bob, you'll find me.
Yeah, it's not hard.
Yeah. No.
That's awesome. All right, everybody. Well, thank you so much for hanging out with us. Tomorrow morning, at noon Eastern, I'll be back here by myself, unveiling Going Now's favorite indie books and indie movies from number 12 to number 6 tomorrow, with a few honorable mentions in there. So you'll want to check that out if you're looking for something to read or watch over the weekend. I'll have a bunch of stuff for you to check out. And then Sunday, it's me and Mr. S.M. Hillman doing This Year at Indies, where we'll unveil the other 5 of my picks. And then Sean has brought his own picks. He will also be doing indie RPG games for you all. So he'll have the top 5 indie RPG games of his 5 favorites of the year. We also have a very special indie connection with CL Cannon on that show, and just so much more to talk about that. And then on Christmas Day, myself and JD Estrada will do our year end picks for our top 10, although we do end up picking like 15 albums of the year. So indie albums. So all week long, we just do the best of all the stuff to head us into 2025, because it's always time to go indie now. And we just love doing it. So take care, everybody. We'll see you again soon. Bye.